morning. This is a particularly important time. As most of you are well aware, this year marks the centennial of the presidential primary in New Hampshire and its first in the nation status. A brave move on the part of this state, and we have continued this tradition now for 100 years, and we are proud of it, and the state has taken care to see that no one shall ever be before us. And so tonight, my friends, we will be hearing from very, very important people, people whom we need to elect. We need to have these people serving in Concord and in Washington to stop the negative Poppingate nonsense that we've been hearing from the other side of the aisle. I submit to you, every tub must stand upon its own bottom, and that bottom begins with New Hampshire Democrats. And we shall soon hear from one of the finest, an excellent barrister, senator, and stateswoman who will tell us how she intends to make these things happen. And so, my friends, as I have often said, no speech ever by anyone at any time should stand in the way of a good supper. So I wish you all the very best. Vote and go Democrats. Thank you all very much.
When Hillary was here on July 4th at Mike and Julie Levine's in Jackson, there were a few of us that said to her, Hillary, you've got to come back for the Grover Cleveland dinner. She said, of course. We are honored and lucky to have her here this evening. Thank you. It wasn't long ago, 10 years ago, that we elected our first Democratic House representative, Tom Bucco, from Carroll County, and now we have filled this ballroom to overflowing. It is great to see and feel the strong and proud Democratic presence in our county. I am so impressed with our keynote speaker. Did you see her respectfully and forcefully face down? Blatantly partisan attacks last week in the Benghazi hearings for over 11 hours. Did you watch her smart and powerful performance in the first Democratic debate? And many of you were there at the Democratic convention last month when she gave one of the best political speeches. No, not just political speeches, one of the best speeches ever to the thousands of people there. Hillary Clinton, lawyer, First Lady of Arkansas, First Lady of the U.S., Senator from New Hampshire, Senator from New York, Secretary of State, mother, wife, grandmother. Did you know that Hillary co-founded an advocacy organization for children and families in 1977 and has championed children and family issues throughout her career? Many of you know that making healthcare affordable and accessible to all is one of my major areas of focus as a state legislator. One of the things that I've learned in the 4 terms that I've been serving in that capacity is that it often takes many tries to work on an issue before you can move it forward. I believe that we might not have the Affordable Care Act were it not for Hillary's earlier work on health care, including her critical role in creating the Children's Health Insurance Program, which extends health insurance coverage to millions of kids. this woman has done and accomplished in her lifetime so far makes me stand in awe of her abilities and her breadth of experience. And she has yet to show us what more she can do. I am honored to welcome to the Mount Washington Valley the first woman who will be our next President of the United States.
About being here, and I appreciate Ed's introduction. I am thrilled to be back in Carroll County, here in the North Country of New Hampshire, a place that is so beautiful and so welcoming, and to see this ballroom filled to capacity as it is tonight on behalf of the Democratic Party. There are a lot of distinguished folks here this evening, and I want to thank each and every one of them, beginning with Eric. Eric, where's Eric? Eric, thank you. He's chaired the Carroll County Democratic Committee, and he told me he was thrilled by the turnout today, and I'm so grateful to you for your leadership. Also, I want to thank Carol Shea Porter, who's here. My longtime friend, Billy Shaheen, and his wonderful wife, your Senator Jean Shaheen, who has been a great friend of mine. We're going to hear from Ray Buckley, the state chair. Happy to see Ray. Dorothy Solomon, the second vice chair, and Stan Solomon. Tom Bucco, who's been already referred to and was the groundbreaker for Democrats going to Concord. And I just love George Cleveland. And I loved his whole declamation, because it used to be that you would have to give a speech like that without any amplification. And so people really had to work on their voices and their projection. And George was telling me that President Grover Cleveland told him, because he loved to hunt and fish, it's one of the reasons he loved being up here, that he composed his best speeches when he was hunting and fishing. And I can just imagine the scene, right? Declaiming to the fish and telling them what he would do as our president. Now, I have a particular liking for Grover Cleveland because, as you may know, he was a New Yorker, and he had a meteoric rise, and then he lost. And then he came back. He was the original comeback kid, Grover Cleveland. I'm pretty fond of him. It's also a thrill to be with you tonight as the Republicans get ready to debate again. For those of you masochistic enough and want to watch, we'll try to get you out in time. I think we have a pretty good idea what to expect as they compete to insult each other, continue demeaning women, double down on trickle down. It really is like a reality TV show. But the cast of characters are out of touch with actual reality, which is what makes it a little bit scary. And I have to say, it's such a contrast. You know, Ed mentioned our first debate, and I thought we were trying to offer real solutions to the challenges facing our country and the world. And I believe that it was a stark contrast to what you've heard twice before from the Republicans and what you're likely to hear tonight. I do, though, have to confess to feeling just a little bit sorry for the Republicans. Just a little. They really don't have a lot to talk about. You know, it must be difficult preparing for their debates, knowing that when you have a Democrat in the White House, the country and the economy does better. And so they've got to wonder to themselves, okay, when a Democrat's in the office, America creates more jobs, the economy grows faster, deficits are smaller. What are we going to say? Well, they go back to the tried and true. Trickle-down economics, cut taxes on the wealthy, get out of the way of corporations. It hasn't worked. There's no evidence it will work, but they hang on to it. And I know they hate it when I say this, but our country's actually 4 times more likely to have a recession when we have a Republican in the White House. So I suppose if I were laboring under those facts, I might not have much to say either. And it's particularly clear that they want us all to have a case of collective amnesia. They want us to forget how we ended up in the Great Recession, don't they? You know, shortly after the 2008 election, President-elect Obama called me, asked me to come see him in Chicago, and I didn't know why at the time. It turns out he wanted to ask me to be Secretary of State, but before we got to that, it was just the 2 of us, and he said, you know, it's so much worse than they told us. I mean, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. What was a Great Recession could have become a Great Depression. And during that period, it was touch and go. Eventually, 9 million Americans lost their jobs, and 13 trillion with a T, dollars worth of family wealth was wiped out because people lost homes, savings accounts, IRAs, 401ks. And most Americans have not recovered fully yet. I thought what President Obama had to do was one of the most difficult tasks facing any modern president. Being handed that set of economic challenges, the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. And I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for making sure we didn't. The auto industry was saved. Crackdowns on Wall Street abuses through Dodd-Frank began. The Affordable Care Act was passed. 18 million Americans now depend on it for their health care. And we've begun to see light again. People are standing. They may not all be running, but we are standing. And we have some work to do together. And I want to build on what we have accomplished, but go further. I'm not running for President Obama's 3rd term. I'm not running for my husband's 3rd term. I'm running for my 1st term, but I'm a proud Democrat, and I'm going to do what works to build an economy that actually produces good jobs and rising income. And what's the alternative? The alternative is to turn the clock back. Out of touch, out of date policies that will rip away the progress we have made. Now, I take this really personally because when I was elected to the Senate from New York, I was really excited because after 8 years of my husband's presidency, we had 23 million new jobs. Incomes rose for everybody, not just those at the top, people in the middle, working folks, even the poor. And we ended up with a balanced budget and a surplus. And if we had maintained those policies, we had the opportunity, had we chosen to, pay off the national debt of the United States of America. So when I got to Washington, I thought, okay, there'll be differences. I'm a Democrat, new president's a Republican, but what can we do with this? We can make Social Security solvent for the rest of the century. We can make Medicare solvent. We can invest in education and medical research and science and innovation. we can do so much that will position us to be as strong in the 21st century as we were in the 20th century. But the Republicans had a very different approach. Almost immediately, President Bush asked for huge tax cuts favoring the wealthy. I voted against that. I voted for an alternative that Democrats put together that was, more moderate. They won, we lost. 9/11 happened. We had to pay billions of dollars to rebuild the Pentagon, New York City, to do more for our security. They wouldn't pay a penny for that, just kept borrowing. Then they cut taxes again. And then we had 2 wars, and he was the first president never to pay 1 penny for the wars that he waged. Took their eyes off the financial markets and the mortgage markets. And you know what happened. So when the Republicans talk about how they want to take the country back, that's exactly what they mean. They want to take it way back to the failed policies that they've inflicted on us before. And they want to continue stacking the deck for those on the top. There is just something wrong when the top 25 hedge fund managers in America make more money than all the kindergarten teachers combined. There is something wrong when a big corporation can get a tax break just by really lobbying for it, and small businesses still can't get loans. Or when the CEO of a drug company jacks up the price of a life-saving drug by 5,000% overnight. Or as a new study out today reported, when 100 CEOs have as much in the bank combined for retirement as 116 million Americans put together. So we can't let the Republicans take us back. And that means we have work to do. Because it is a siren song that they have learned how to play very well. Convincing people that just let them have it one more time and they will create growth and jobs. Well, for one, I'm not buying, and I intend to take that argument to them day after day. Because our real challenge in this election is to make sure the American people, starting right here in New Hampshire, understand what's at stake. I think we have economic challenges that we have to meet together, and I've laid out my economic policies. I believe strongly we can create more good-paying jobs, and there are 2 areas in particular. Let's start building and repairing the infrastructure we need to make us competitive globally again and bring millions of Americans to work. And let's combat climate change by investing in clean energy, which will create millions of new jobs and businesses. Let's make sure that the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes by closing the loopholes and the deductions like the carried interest loophole that I've been against for 10 years. And let's make sure that we have the tools that are needed to raise incomes. I want to see more businesses share their profits, like Market Basket here in New England, which had a big fight about it and came out on the right side. And I want to be sure that women get equal pay for equal work. Obviously I care a lot about this. I had a little girl at a town hall in Nevada. I called on her. I never know what little kids are going to say, which is part of the reason why I call on them, because it's always kind of interesting. And she stood up and she said, if you're the girl president, will you get paid the same as the boy president? I said, I think so. the gap between pay for the same work between men and women is higher here than the national average. So this is not a problem for somebody somewhere far away. This is a problem everywhere in America. And we need to also take a hard look at how families are balancing their work responsibilities with their families today. I cannot tell you how many young women come up to me and talk about how hard it is to stay in the workforce after they become a mother. Childcare in some parts of our country is more expensive than tuition at a college. And that's assuming you can find quality, affordable childcare that you want to leave your child in while you go to work. We need paid family leave. We don't have it in America, except in California, which has had it for years. And so we've got to take a hard look at how we're living today in order to really put together an economy that works for us. It's 2015, not 1950. And we've got to take into account the stresses and strains that are on families. So when I say I'm going to make raising incomes the center of my campaign, I mean it. How do we get more good paying jobs and get incomes rising? It's also important that we make sure education is preparing our young people to be competitive in the global economy. And I think that starts with early childhood education, 0 to 5, the more kids get off to a good start. And we sure better do something to make college more affordable and get down student debt, or we're not going to see young people as we go into the workforce. We have a real problem. We have all these great young people, and a lot of them are not employed because they're underemployed, or they're unable to get the job they want to take because they have such heavy student debt. We are just holding them back, and by holding them back, we're holding ourselves back. So I have a plan for reducing debt and making tuition debt-free for public colleges and universities, for middle-class families and working families, and for kids with ambition and talent. And when it comes to health care, I'm going to defend the Affordable Care Act. We have worked too hard. Some people want to reopen the debate. The Republicans have voted now 60 times to repeal it. They never tell you what they'll put in place, do they? They don't want to. They don't want to tell you because they want to just turn it back over to the insurance companies so that once again, women are charged more than men. Young people can't stay on their parents' policies until they're 26. We can't go back, but we do have to make some changes. We have to make it much more efficient. The out-of-pocket expenses are too high for too many families. The deductibles are too high. There's not enough competition in the insurance markets. So we've got work to do, but I'm going to defend that foundation and build on it. And there are 3 areas in particular that I really want us to think about together. One is we're going to have a caregiving crisis in America. I bet every one of us could talk about either our own families or somebody we know. I met this young man in Manchester during the convention. I was shaking hands backstage. He said, "What can you do to help me?" I said, "What's your problem?" He said, I'm taking care of my mother. She has Alzheimer's. I can't afford a full-time caregiver. I can't afford to give up my job." He was a teacher. "And I don't know what to do." I said, "So what are you doing now?" He said, "I'm taking her to work with me. I have nowhere else for her." I tell you that story because I hear stories like this all over the country. Alzheimer's, autism, you name it. We have so many families that are caregiving. We've got to figure out how we're going to give them some respite, some support, some tax breaks so that they can do the work that they want to do to take care of their loved ones. And then we've got to deal with this substance abuse problem. Here in New Hampshire, we have an epidemic. I've held 2 town halls that were only on the subject of addiction. In Laconia, and then a week or so ago in Keene. And they were packed. with people telling me their stories about their children or their siblings or their parents. And I really applaud your governor for rolling out a substance abuse platform right here in New Hampshire to deal with what's going on in the state. And I'm going to be a good partner at the federal level to help states that want to really make a difference in getting more people into recovery and treatment, working with the police so that they're able to intervene and try to get people off the streets into some kind of program, not just on the fast track to jail, which won't do anything to help them with their addiction. We've got to come to grips with this, just like we do with untreated mental health problems. Something that I, again, hear about everywhere. And we just don't have the facilities and the resources to deal with what's going on in mental health. And we have to come up with some plans. You know, it's supposed to be treated the same as physical health, but nobody gets that kind of treatment unless you're really well off and you can afford it. And it's something that, again, people are so intimate. You wouldn't imagine what it's like running for office. Maybe it's because of the fact I'm a woman or I'm a mom or a grandmother, but people will just take my arms and pull me close and say, please try to help us. My son is schizophrenic, and there's nowhere for him to go. We can't afford the kind of treatment he needs. I just hear it everywhere. So those are some of the health and caregiving issues that we're going to have to face as a country. We also have a lot of work to do against the Republicans to defend human rights, women's rights, gay rights, voting rights, all of the rights that we believe are important. Just listen to them. You can hear what they're saying. You know, they compete with trying to interfere in women's lives for a party and for candidates who decry big government. They sure don't mind using it to interfere with some of the most personal decisions that women ever have to face. And they are going after Planned Parenthood, and it's wrong. And we need to defend Planned Parenthood, not defund Planned Parenthood. And when it comes to gay rights, I'm thrilled that marriage equality is now a constitutional right. But you can get married on Saturday in a lot of states in our country and get fired on Monday. We have got to pass the Equality Act in Congress. We've got to end discrimination against the LGBT community, because it's just not right to have our friends, our neighbors, people that we know treated like that. And it is going to be one of my highest civil rights, not just gay rights, civil rights priorities. Voting rights. Who would have thought that in 2015 I'd be here saying we have to defend voting rights? I know when we passed the Voting Rights Act. I thought that was open and shut. And then the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act that I voted for 98-0 in the Senate, and George W. Bush signed. And as soon as the Supreme Court gave the signal, states began to clamp down and try to limit voting rights for the elderly, for people of color, for young people. And all across the country, these laws are being passed and enforced. I was down in Alabama at the Democratic conference there a couple of weeks ago, and their governor and legislature had imposed new requirements for people to be able to vote. They had to have a photo ID, and there was a very limited type of photo ID that would be able to count, and one of those was the driver's license. And then they go and shut the motor vehicle offices in the counties with the heaviest black populations. And then they say, well, it had nothing to do with voting rights, or it certainly is not discriminatory, it was a budget matter. Now, as I said, when I was speaking to this big crowd of Alabama Democrats, I said, you know, I lived a lot of wonderful years in Arkansas, and I learned a lot. One of my favorite sayings from those days is, if you find a turtle on a fence post, it didn't get there by accident. So we're going to do everything we can to protect and defend voting rights. And while we're at it, the next president may get as many as 3 appointments to the Supreme Court. If you have any Republican friends who are still on the fence, I hope you will ask them what that might mean to them. Because if we don't pull back some of these decisions, like voting rights, like Citizens United, one of the worst decisions in history, we will not recognize our democracy. You know, I want everybody to vote. I'd love for them to vote for me, but even if they don't, I want them to vote. I want everybody to participate in our political system, but we've got to get dark, unaccountable money out of it in order for people's votes and voices to count. And I'm going to support a constitutional amendment if necessary. We also have to defend our veterans and the services and benefits that they deserve. We need to reform the VA. Absolutely, we need to reform it. It needs to work. It needs to be responsive and respectful. And all of the problems need to be put under a bright spotlight and eliminated. But make no mistake about it, I will not let the Republicans use the problems as an excuse to privatize the VA and to end it as part of their ideological crusade. I will also continue to fight for comprehensive immigration reform because I think it's good for our economy and it's good for our country. And I traveled to 112 countries on your behalf as Secretary of State, and I was very proud to do that. But I saw what happens when you have 2 tiers of people living in a country. It doesn't work. It breeds resentment and hostility. And there are many reasons to support comprehensive immigration reform, but one of them is it's in keeping with who we are as Americans. And it is at root one of our most fundamental values. Now, I will also defend Social Security and Medicare from the efforts by the Republicans to privatize the When I was in the Senate, George Bush came up with a privatization plan. Some of you might remember that. It would have been a disaster. And we defeated it. As your president, I will defend it. I will not let anybody think that they can privatize it, but we're going to have to make sure that we shore it up so that it is there, not just for those who are currently recipients, but for generations to come. And I will especially focus on those Social Security recipients, predominantly women, who are still impoverished after they get their monthly check because they didn't either work themselves or they were working at jobs long ago that paid very little, or they were married and now are widowed or divorced and their husbands didn't make much money. And that to me is the first order of business. So we'll defend it and we'll enhance it, especially for people who need it. And I will defend the rights of Americans to be safe from gun violence in their schools. Now, I have been told to stop shouting about gun violence. But I won't be silenced, and I hope you won't either. How many more people have to die before we take action? It's really important to me that we not get intimidated. 90 people a day die from guns. Homicides, suicides, and accidents. We can surely do better than that. That's 33,000 people a year. If 33,000 people a year were dying from something else, we would be addressing it, wouldn't we? There are reasonable gun safety measures that I have proposed. Universal background checks, of course. Closing the gun show loophole, yes. Doing more to prevent online sales from ending up in the hands of people who couldn't get them if they walked into a gun store. Closing the so-called Charleston loophole. That's the one where at the end of 3 business days, if your background check has not been fully completed, you can still get the gun. That's what happened with the young man who went into that church. Just another 24, 48 hours, they would have found out he had a felony to his record. He wouldn't have gotten that gun. And we have to reverse the unique lack of accountability that the gun industry has been given. They are free. They are immune from liability. I voted against that too when I was in the Senate. There is no industry in America given that kind of blank check other than the gun makers and sellers. So we cannot give in or give up. I know this is hard. The only president that really took them on and beat them was my husband. And he did it, and we got rid of assault weapons off the streets for 10 years. It made a difference. So I am going to ask people to really think hard about what we can do together. You know, a majority of Americans, a majority of gun owners support these provisions. We need to make them voting issues as well. So there's a lot for us to do on the economy, on health and education, on defending and promoting our rights. And we also have to continue to lead the world by our values and our principles. I am absolutely convinced that America's leadership is as needed today as it's ever been. The opposite of American leadership is not somebody else's, it's a void, it's a vacuum, to be filled by rogue states and networks of criminals and terrorists. That's not good for us, it's not good for our friends and our partners and our allies around the world. Now in the last 2 debates, and I'll be anxious to see if they do it again, Republicans spent a lot of time attacking me. They seem to do that. When in doubt, when they have nothing else to say, when they don't want to take any responsible action. And they spend a lot of time saying things like, well, I don't know what you ever did as Secretary of State. You didn't do anything. You know, there's a lot worth fighting for in this country that we love. And as I said at the debate in Las Vegas, I'm a progressive who likes to get things done. Starting with our values, values that are really at the root of who we are here in America. And then realizing after the election is over, we're all on the same team. We're on the American team. It's time to come together, roll up our sleeves, start solving our problems. And there's no reason we can't do that. That's how progress happens. It's what I've seen in my own career, from the kitchen table to the peace table. And I know how hard it is, but I'm just getting warmed up. And I want your help and your support in this election to send that every battle, but I've learned from each one, and I know how to find common ground, and I know when to stand my ground. I'm the granddaughter of a factory worker. Came here with his family as a young immigrant. Went to work in the lace mills in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He worked hard because he wanted to give a better life. He wanted to give the American dream to his sons, and he did. They all went to college. My dad, after he got out of World War II, serving in the Navy, He started a small business. Now here I am standing in front of you running for president. That is, for me, that is the American story, and I bet if we had time, every one of you could tell me your version of it. Now I have this granddaughter, this extraordinary, amazing granddaughter. And, you know, Bill and I just spend our time looking at her. She puts such a smile on our faces, and thankfully, her parents don't mind us just dropping in anytime. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure she has every opportunity, but that is not enough. What kind of country will she become an adult in? What kind of world will be out there waiting for her? You see, I don't think it's enough that the granddaughter of a former president may still have the chance to pursue her dreams in a country that has been a dream maker from the very beginning. I want to make sure the granddaughters of factory workers and the grandsons of truck drivers have exactly the same opportunity. Doing everything I can as your president. Continuing the work I started so many years ago with the Children's Defense Fund, with all the work that I have done on behalf of underdogs, the marginalized, the left behind, the folks who get marginalized and sometimes forgotten. Every day I'm going to ask myself, what can I do today? And at the end of the day, I'm going to ask myself, what have I done? Make sure every person in this country, and particularly every child, has the chance to pursue those dreams. This country is such a gift. It's a blessing. And it is up to us to make sure that our children and our grandchildren understand that, believe that, and live that. Thank you all very, very much.